Asenyi besi mi fai wa miaro. Asenyi miara. Asenyi besi mi fai wa miara. Esume yi besi ni fai wa miara. Abore yi besi ni fai wa miara. Miara, enyo miara. Asenyi besi ni fai wa miaro. Asenyi miara. Asenyi besi ni fai wa miara. Edume yi besi ni fai wa miara. Abure yi besi ni fai wa miara. Enyo miara. Asenyi besi ni fai wa miaro. Asenyi miara. Asenyi besi ni fai wa miara. Ejume yi besi ni fai wa miara. Abure yi besi ni fai wa miara. Enyo miara.
Agreeing to chair this function. In fact, she had to come from Accra this morning, all because of this function. So, Prof, we are very grateful that you accepted to be here. We are all very familiar with the recent BBC documentary on the alleged sex for grade, following which the topic of sexual harassment in universities has come under the spotlight. Although the content of the documentary and the title appear to be at variance, many people welcome the attention and the interest the documentary generated on the topic of sexual harassment, particularly when it offered the opportunity to discuss the problem and to nip it in the bud. Sexual harassment has always been perceived as a real problem within all segments of the Ghanaian society, including the universities. This is why many institutions have policies that seek to monitor, control, and eradicate it. Reports indicate that when the documentary was released, the UCC community was engulfed in an easy cloud of suspicion and rumor mongering, which unsettled students, lecturers, and other members of the community, as people were not sure whether another documentary, this time focusing on UCC, was going to come out. In fact, I didn't see the tension and I didn't see the atmosphere which was reported, but whether we like it or not, that is what was reported. And I remember the Joy FM reporter talking about students being tight-lipped, and yet in their closet they would talk about what was going on. As these stories circulated, it was unclear how members of the university community could tell the truth from the falsehood and the realities from the invented. In all these developments, one thing stood out clearly, and it was the fact that both students and workers appeared not to be fully aware of what is entailed in our own sexual harassment policy. It is for this reason that UTAG decided to put this program together to help educate our members, and for that matter, the entire university community, on what is enshrined in our own laws. While doing this, it is also proper to examine the realities and the myths surrounding the topic. Indeed, some have argued that some of the provisions in our laws need to be reviewed. It is expected that today's discussions will bring all this to the fore to help authorities concerned to begin to take action. We will therefore listen to speakers from the Sexual Harassment Committee, the Counseling Center, Office of the Dean of Students, and of course from the Student Representative Council, as well as from SEGRAD, and individuals who would share their own experience. In fact, I have met colleagues, lecturers who have said today they want to share their experiences, what they are going through. So I hope that at the discussion, period, all of us will be frank and come out and discuss what our experiences are. While it is important to talk about sexual harassment, it is also important to highlight its related issues, such as physical abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect, with the view of safeguarding and protecting the vulnerable, which includes both men and women. In fact, I can say that when we first advertised, we put out the flyer, there were backlashes as to why all the images we were using were men harassing women. But let me say that we found it very difficult finding pictures of women harassing men. And we managed to find one. And that one, I'm sure later on he will show it, the other one, not this one. It is very difficult to tell, yes, it is very difficult to tell whether the woman is actually harassing the man, because the man is laughing. So we struggled to get this picture, but I told my team that we needed to use it because the men were complaining. But your guess is as good as mine. I don't know who is harassing which one. So it is my expectation that we will have very frank discussions among ourselves, devoid of emotions and name calling, or pointing accusing fingers, or being gender biased as it has been on some platforms. May we all live here appreciating the threats of sexual exploitation and abuse and the danger it poses to our university community. Once again, I welcome all of us to this event, and may we have fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
We are looking at the effectiveness of the sexual harassment policy as far as the University of Cape Coast is concerned. And a policy, I start by interrogating what a policy is as to whether it has an effect of law, because a policy is actually different from what a law is. And from the introduction, I start by saying that a policy is a statement of intent, general principles or guidelines which outline what an organization hopes to achieve and the methods and principles it will use to achieve them. So it's sort of a guiding principle. It sets some guidelines. Now, as opposed to law, a law also has guidelines for conduct or behavior, but the law also goes ahead to prescribe some punishments for infringing those laws. To that extent, ordinarily, a policy is different from a law. But as far as the UCC sexual harassment policy is concerned, I take the view that it is indeed a law, because if we situate it in context, we would come to the conclusion that it is a law. Please let's go to the next slide quickly. So in the second point, I say that it's a hybrid because it contains principles and expected standards of behavior, as well as applicable sanctions. It has a whole range of sanctions. Please let's go. Now, in Article 11(1) of the 1992 Constitution, it prescribes or outlines the various sources of law in the country. Now, in those laws, it includes, the third one says, any orders, rules, and regulations made by any person or authority under a power conferred by this Constitution. The 1992 Constitution confers a power on Parliament to enact laws. Parliament further confers authority on other bodies to also pass laws on their own. To the extent that the University of Cape Coast was established by an act, that is PNDC Law 278, in which it states that the council of the university, as well as the university itself, can make laws to regulate its activities. My view is that the sexual harassment policy is a law. Please let's go on to the next one. Section 12 of the UCC Act, that is PNDC Law 278, this is what it has to say. Without prejudice to committees established under this law, that is under PNDC Law 278, the University Council may establish committees and boards by statute as it considers necessary for the effective discharge of the aims of the university. In furtherance of this, the Sexual Harassment Committee has been set up because it's a creature of the University Statutes of 2016. So that is how come I conclude that it is a law on its own. And therefore, if we say it's a law, it means that according to our Criminal and Other Offences Act of 1960, something is an offense when a law says it is so. So, to the extent that the sexual harassment policy describes or prescribes what constitutes offensive behavior together with its applicable punishment, my humble view is that indeed it is a law, and therefore it is not just a guideline or a guiding principle. If you flout the regulations embedded therein, there are applicable sanctions. Now, there are a number of provisions as far as the policy is concerned. First of all, there is a purpose of it. It says the University of Cape Coast recognizes that sexual, and this is from the foreword, from the very first page. It recognizes that sexual harassment undermines the integrity of the society and the workplace because it focuses on the recipient's sexuality instead of his or her talents, intellect, and abilities. So UCC will not tolerate sexual harassment and will take steps to ensure that it does not occur. If it does occur, sufferers should be free to seek redress without fear of reprisal. So in effect, it says it prescribes a standard of behavior for the university community as well as preventive and response mechanisms in cases of breach. The previous one says, please let's go back. Yes, next. It says, this document governs the university's response in the event of a complaint of sexual harassment. The sexual harassment policy presented here applies to all members of the university, staff, students, and university guests. Ordinarily, this is okay, but Prof. Chair, I take issues with the word guests because it goes beyond guests. When we say it applies to university guests, the question is, who is a university guest? There may be trespassers on campus. Does it mean that they could be sexually harassed because they are not recognized as guests of the university? That is something to interrogate further. There is what we describe in the law of torts as the principle of occupier's liability. This principle indicates that somebody who occupies premises, either by way of a lease agreement or just by being there lawfully or otherwise. As far as this is concerned, it says that there is a duty of care which is owed by those who occupy real property through ownership or lease to people who visit or trespass. It deals with liability that may arise from accidents caused by defective or dangerous condition of the premises. So when we say university guests, it starts with lawful visitors. So we have various service providers. We could have contractors working on campus. Those are the first category of guests we refer to. Secondly, we have invitees, people who enter the premises for a purpose in which UCC as an institution has a material interest. It could be a lawful guest for specific activities. So if we organize open days, fairs, and programs like that, we have people who come over here. They are described as invitees. Next, we have another category referred to as licensees, and then persons who enter as of right. So a couple of weeks ago, we had the unfortunate incident of the flooding. We had fire personnel coming over here, I believe people from outside the university as well. They came as of right. We could have meter readers. We could have emergency service providers. They have the right to be on campus. So the sexual harassment policy covers these people or these persons as well. So the question remains, are trespassers covered? A trespasser, is somebody who enters premises either without the right to be there or without permission. This is somebody who is not within the contemplation of the sexual harassment policy. But the law generally is that trespassers, though entering premises at their own risk, Deliberate harm should not be caused to them. Deliberate harm should by no means be caused to trespassers. To that extent, my humble view is that the sexual harassment policy extends beyond university guests. It indeed includes trespassers, because the principle is you must not do harm to trespassers. I will fortify this by, in Matthew 19 and 19, Jesus Christ says you should love your neighbor as yourself. When this is translated into the law of tort, specifically under negligence, the rule is that do not cause harm to your neighbor. Do not injure your neighbor. The definition of neighbor is given in a particular case, the case of Donohue against Stevenson. It says one who is so closely or directly affected by your acts that you ought to have that person within your reasonable contemplation when directing your mind to the act or omission called into question. One who is so closely and directly affected by your acts that you ought to have that person within your reasonable contemplation when you are directing your mind to that act or omission which has been called into question. So we know there might be robbers on campus. We know there might be other forms of trespassers on campus. The rule is that do not intentionally cause harm to them. That is even in the law of negligence, which has a lower standard than in crime. So, Prof, my humble submission on this is that though it is expressly indicated that it extends to guests, I believe that it covers trespassers as well. The fact that somebody is a trespasser on campus does not mean that that person can be sexually harassed. Please, let's go on. So, it goes on, the policy goes on to outline what constitutes sexual harassment. It says it is unwelcome sexual advances, request for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, whether on a one-time basis or a series of incidents that might cause offense, humiliation, awkwardness, or embarrassment, or that might reasonably be conceived as placing a condition of a sexual nature on employment, opportunity for promotion, grades, etc. So it's a continuum. It could be a one-time experience, or it could be something which is consistent and or persistent. I looked at the definitions for other universities. I considered that of Ashesi, I looked at UDS, I looked at KNUST, University of Ghana, and they all appear to be in line. The bottom line is it should be an unwanted or unwelcome sexual advance. It doesn't matter, it is a comment. It doesn't matter, it is a statement in passing. Indeed, in the course of the presentation, hopefully if time does allow, we would come across the case of two former officials of the Ghana Football Association who were suspended by the Federation of International Football Associations, that is FIFA, for sexually harassing somebody in Papua New Guinea, based on a comment which was passed. Indeed, the alleged victim indicated that there was communication in the local dialect. So she didn't understand, but she felt embarrassed. So sexual harassment focuses on the victim, and it's something that we ordinarily would refer to in law as an offense of strict liability. An offense of strict liability is one that focuses on the outcome, on the victim. It has nothing to do with the perpetrator's intention. So you don't need to have intended the consequences. That, oh, I didn't know she would feel embarrassed. Oh, I didn't know he wouldn't like it. So once the result of embarrassment has been attained, the offense of sexual harassment is constituted. And indeed, that is one big challenge for us on this campus and then elsewhere, because the general mindset is that there was no touching and he just passed a comment or a casual remark in passing. But it is an offense of strict liability. One need not have intended the consequences. You just make the statement and then the law takes you on. So the result of Ashesi, there is KNUST, University of Ghana, as well. Please roll on UDS. Now, UCC sexual harassment policy talks about vitiation of consent. On page 3 of the policy, it says sexual relations between individuals in a context involving a power differential and which provides avenues for the receipt of benefits cannot be considered to be consensual. So, even though there is consent between a lecturer and a student, between a supervisor and then the student or candidate being supervised, even though there is consent, the law says consent is vitiated. It means that consent is of no effect so long as there is a relationship of power imbalance. Because of the power dynamics at play, the policy expressly prohibits or forbids it. We go on to justify this by Article 15(1) of the 1992 Constitution. It says, the dignity of all persons shall be inviolable. So all persons are entitled to dignity. To the extent that sexual harassment causes embarrassment and loss of dignity on the part of the victim, the Constitution comes to our aid in justifying UCC's express prohibition of sexual harassment because it violates the dignity of the individual. Now, there is what we refer to in law of contract as duress and then undue influence. As far as undue influence is concerned in particular, there is a relationship of power imbalance. A medical doctor as against a patient being treated. A lecturer who draws up the course content, course outline, he administers examinations, he marks, he grades the students. If you are interested in buying a laptop, a tablet, a phone from such a student, examination timetable has been released, a draft one. The lecturer has set his questions. The end of semester will be written. The lecturer would mark, the lecturer would grade, and the student, the lecturer is interested in something being sold by the student. At what price is the student going to sell to the lecturer? Whatever consent that the student might give, the law vitiates it because there is a relationship of power imbalance. In most cases, you would not get it at the market price. It will be grossly reduced for you. And the law respects that such consent is not to be countenanced. So that is another justification for vitiating or disallowing consent, even where the parties in an institution like this have given consent to each other. So there is illegitimacy of the pressure which is exerted. There is a threat, whether veiled or expressed, as far as such power dynamics are concerned. So enough of undue influence. Let's go to the composition of the committee, which has been outlined. I won't spend much time on this. We go on to the functions of the committee. Provision of education for the university community, monitoring compliance with the policy, and ensuring that newly appointed staff and fresh students receive orientation, and then being responsible for the production and dissemination of educational materials for our community. Now, when there is a case of sexual harassment, what happens when it comes to the attention of the committee? There is an initial pre-committee stage. The victim ordinarily would approach the counseling unit, and then there is a form to be filled. The complaint is referred formally to the committee. The committee is mandated to initially contact the alleged victim, at least to reassure him or her that the complaint is receiving the necessary attention. Then dates for hearings are set. Ordinarily, the policy indicates that we should try as much as possible to meet the parties separately because of the emotions involved. It's possible, however, for the parties to agree that they could come face to face and each will cross-examine the other. After this, a draft report is supposed to be given to the parties. Within 5 days, The parties are supposed to give their comments, if any. Now, altogether, the committee has a total of 21 working days within which to present its decision to the Vice Chancellor, who ultimately ratifies it. In case there is dissatisfaction by any of the parties, they have a right of appeal in appealing to the Vice Chancellor, and he holds the final say. In the case of the University of Ghana, I realized that the committee has 60 days within which to come to a conclusion. UCC sticks to 21 working days. There are sanctions which are applicable. It depends on the gravity of the offense. So from an apology, that is a formal written apology, to a formal reprimand. Educational project, we recommended one last semester for somebody to take a particular course in sexual and domestic violence or harassment to appreciate what it takes to commit sexual harassment. I'm sure we are yet to follow up whether the student registered for this semester, so that is some work for us. So there are a range of applicable sanctions. As to whether it is effective or not, well, the users of the committee might be the better judges. But I make an analogy to the independence of the judiciary. Oftentimes, when decisions, especially at the Supreme Court, go against the government of the day, the judiciary is touted as being independent. The focus is not on whether there was a good case by which party before it. But so long as the decisions go against the government of the day, the judiciary was very independent. In our case, we appear to also suffer a similar fate, that so long as cases come before us and then there are no convictions or adverse findings against the alleged perpetrators, it means we are not being effective. Let's run through. I think I will save the rest for a number of questions when they arise. Please let's roll on and let me talk about one or two more things. Next, I wish to talk about the challenges. The policy starts by saying we are an equal opportunities university. Ghana is not an equal opportunities country. We are yet to recognize the rights of the LGBTs. So long as we are under Ghana, this statement is problematic in my humble view. There appears to be low publicity, and that is work for the Sexual Harassment Committee in tandem with SEGRAD. We need to do more. Now, again, when I mentioned I think the offense of strict liability, we've talked about it already. The fact that our statements or our comments sometimes are unwelcome, we don't focus on that. That is a challenge. So appreciating the definition of what constitutes sexual harassment is a challenge for most people, university lecturers, staff, and then students as well. I've talked about strict liability already. So the GFA officials I talked about, that was on the previous slide. Please let's go on. Now, non-consensual relationship. Question: what about those who are already in consensual relationships? Senior members, senior staff, already in consensual relationship. The policy is silent on it because these people might be lawfully married even before the policy came into effect. What happens? Because power dynamics. One is subservient, I use that advisedly, to the other in terms of having his or her work being evaluated by the higher authority. I see also a conflict between the policy and the statute. The policy gives the committee 3 years tenure, but the statute indicates it is 2 years. Ultimately, the statute would hold sway, but it is something we could have avoided in the policy. May I finish in the next 2 minutes? Thank you. Membership of the committee, Prof. Chair, it is there boldly. May I read? This is not an adversarial committee. It does not serve as a court of law. It therefore cannot include members of the legal profession. I happen to be the chair, and I have been in the legal profession for the past 14 years. The policy says I am not supposed to be a member of the committee, but I head the committee. This is my second year of heading the committee. So that is a challenge that I see. The major one is the appellate procedure. Now, where the committee finishes its work, the report is submitted to the Vice Chancellor as the Chief Disciplinarian of the university. It goes on to say in Chapter 3.10 that where there is a grievance or where somebody is aggrieved at the outcome of the findings of the committee, that person has a right of appeal within 7 days to the Vice Chancellor. Now, there is a legal principle which is encapsulated in the Latin maxim, which goes this way: Nemo iudex in causa sua. Nemo iudex in causa sua. That is, no man can be a judge in his own cause. No man can be a judge in his own cause or matter. So, to the extent that the Vice Chancellor has approved the decision of the Sexual Harassment Committee, the law disables him from exercising oversight or appellate jurisdiction over his own decision, because he would have ratified. I checked, and then the University of Ghana has an appeals board which could handle such instances. My suggestion, humble though, is for us to have a look at this particular provision, or to cede that authority to the Pro-Vice Chancellor so that the ultimate appeal would rest with the Vice Chancellor. I believe I've exhausted the key recommendations that I had. So, in wrapping up, Prof. Chair and then distinguished members of the university fraternity and trespassers, if there are any, I was supposed to share a few thoughts with you on the effectiveness of the sexual harassment policy. As a policy, I believe it has a force of law, and therefore, in case any one of us, hopefully not, falls foul of it, the law provides a mechanism or means for dealing with us. According to our constitutional provisions, this is a law on its own, situated within the broader University Statute, as well as the UCC Act PNDC Law 278. There are general guidelines of procedure which are outlined in case there is a breach of conduct as far as sexual harassment is concerned. As a committee, we are doing our bit, but I concede that there is more to be done, especially by way of education and dissemination of information as to the existence of the policy.
For this program, and also maybe the experience to share, because myself and the Pro-Vice Chancellor over the past 2 or 3 years have been talking about this issue. We have on our own been discussing these issues, especially when some things related to these issues have come up. And so I'm happy that she's here, and then I'm also here. What this relates to is the workplace, workplace. As Vincent said, I'm sharing these experiences with you as somebody having worked as a hall administrator, that's as a senior admin assistant in Atlantic Hall through to this stage now. So I'm really talking about a compilation and a combination of experiences from the administrative point as well as from the academic point, and also maybe from my work as a counselor. But I in no way report on counselees here in what I'm coming to talk about. So I'm not giving a report on counselees. Our interaction with our counselees at the center is highly confidential. So please note that. Going through the definitions of the earlier discussion by lawyer Swansea Sien, and also coming across what I saw with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in the United States, there is a commission called U.S.
Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that in 2012 defined sexual harassment as an unwelcome sexual advance, request for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature with negative impacts on victims' employment or work performance, or creates intimidating or offensive work environment. And you see that it is situated in all that the lawyer said earlier. And what our president said in his opening address, that sexual harassment has some associated effects. And for me, moving on from what he said, or adding to what he said, is something from Jang et al. 2015, which said that sexual harassment is associated with undesirable physical and psychological effects. When I listen to lawyer talking about the Nima Kosa Swa, what came to my mind is, and talking about the interrelationship or the interaction, what Latin word also came to my mind to use is quid pro quo. And that is the in word now, quid pro quo. Why is it so? It is so because of the power imbalance. If you give me this, I give you that. And that is what he talked about with respect to vitiation of consent. So that you are using what you have to get the response of the individual for a sexual request. So who sets the questions? So who fills your end of year assessment? Right? So I'm talking not only in the academic field, I'm talking from my experiences from the administration as well as in the academic. So who fills your end of year evaluation form? Part of which, if it has not been removed, Director HR, which says that, do you recommend this applicant for increase in salary? So if I can recommend or not recommend an increase in salary for you, what is it that I can do? And with my experience, for some of them, if you graded them out of 40 and they got 25, they were not happy because the next person had graded them, giving them 38. So they are used to 38 over 40, 38 over 40. But after having discussed the issues with them and you arrive at 25 over 40, they will tell you, so they mentioned, so if it is Mr. James on 38. So if I give you 25 and I have what it takes to give you 38, what is it that I want to get from you that I won't get? So the power imbalance. So what is it that will happen when the individual turns down the sexual request? Your guess is as good as mine. But I come to my question, what I'm supposed to address. Is it real? You already have the answer. You already have the answer for each of us. You have the answer. So you take which answer you have. Whether you know or you don't, take it. But I know we know. Or I know that we know that we know. Right. So we know the reality. What do we know about sexual harassment? If anybody asked you, actually, less of defending your institution to say that I'm from UCC and so I can say that it doesn't exist. You want to defend the corporate body. But within us, we know that it happens. And it does happen. There are reports we hear. There are people who said to people who said to people that we heard. And there are people who said it to us directly that we heard. So on the face of the hearing, we will say it exists. But going beyond the hearing, can we say it exists? Because you won't just hear it for hearing's sake, and you want to probe. By our training, for some of us, you want to find out, you want to ask questions, you want to do this, you want to do that, you want to do that. You get to a point and you are stuck. Why? You get to a point where you want to take it up as an issue to really go into it, and as outlined by the policy, you hear that the person must, if the report gets to the counselor must do this, must do that. Once it gets to you and you want to probe, it stops there. So you have the client who is disinterested. You have the client who is not forthcoming with the facts again. And sometimes they come to you the second time and tell you a different thing. You have the client who comes and then says that, well, I said this, but I don't intend to push it further. But the first time you came with that report and you wanted to go all out. You said, yes, I want to go all out. So let's move the next step, the next day. So what is the issue then? Pointing of fingers. The fear of reporting, the fear of taking it forward, the fear of putting somebody's job at risk, the fear of putting somebody's family at risk. So you'll be there and a client or a student or a worker will come to you and said, I said it, but now it's not the case. Because this person has come to me, this person has come to me, this person has come to me. And they said, if I press it further, the person is going to lose their job. The family is, the person is the breadwinner for the family and all that. So you begin to ask yourself that when the person was doing what he did he think about all those things? So to say the least, the bottom line is that we know that it is real. The issue is just that people do not really come out to say they don't want to press further. But there have been cases that the facts have not proved the actual case. There have been cases. And the lawyer talks about consensual and all that. So there are issues about the issue of consensual. Even if I have to agree, because he is my superior, even I have to agree, at what point would I say, come and report that it is harassment? Some of the cases that we have heard, and for me, as a young administrator, I heard a lot of things. Some of the cases we have heard was when the grapes turn sour, then people tend to report. And there have been cases that people have really reported. It has not just been, I'm sorry, but it has not just been the students. It's been also the workers as well. It's been people's wives, it's been people's husbands. Our president says he didn't find the picture for the males being harassed. There are more pictures. There are more pictures. And then he also says that small picture he showed, the lady sitting, is this one you are referring to? So you are saying that you don't know whether the guy is laughing or not. He's not laughing. He doesn't like it. Is he laughing? Then that means this woman too is smiling. You know, we have, for me, we have really tilted the issue towards the female. That what happens when a female, either your colleague runs her hand through your head. Oh, your hair is nice. Your shirt is nice. Holds the shirt and all that. What do you do? Well, I'm told you have experiences that everybody will be sharing. I shared two of my experiences with the province. You know, so the bottom line is that it exists. It is real, but it's about the fact and the desire for us to push forward. And so it calls for us to talk about it, to find ways to really curtail it. The other issue is whether it can be eliminated at all. But when we are educated, it can curtail it. Thank you very much.
I am delighted to share on this all-important platform with the singular intent and purpose of seeing this matter through the lens of students who are usually the victims, perceived or real. Ladies and gentlemen, my responsibility this afternoon is to share my thoughts on sexual harassment, which for a lecturer, it may be a career-threatening matter, but for a student, especially a female student, it is a life-threatening issue. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, may I state emphatically that sexual harassment and its related issues are real and existent on this campus. Today's gathering is a testimony to that effect. Otherwise, then we would have been said to have wasted time, effort, and resources in coming here to interrogate myth. The main challenge in fighting this menace is in the fear and inability of victims to own up and report to the appropriate quarters. So far as that silence, that shade of darkness is provided by lack of exposure of it, the act will thrive because evil thrives in secrecy. Much has been said about the definition of sexual harassment, and previous speakers have also defined it and given the realities and myths of sexual harassment. Let's also listen to what some of our students had to say about sexual harassment. I had little interactions with some students to find out what students know about sexual harassment. I should say, a lot are not abreast with a technical definition. Due to that, I would like to decouple sexual harassment from sexual advance for the purpose of this discussion and touch briefly on why even sexual advance is ethically wrong. This is for the benefit of the layman or woman or the ordinary student who may not have read the sexual harassment policy of the university and may not see some romantic advances by some lecturers or senior members as sexual harassment in the very denotative meaning of harassment. The sexual harassment gets to its peak when it's time for project work, when it's getting to exams period like we are now. Madam Chair, I will not be surprised if, as I'm talking now, a student is locked up at the mercy of a lecturer and begging to be left alone. What we should know is that students really talk a lot. And I'm saying this because they will always feel comfortable to speak to their fellow students. Prior to me becoming a student leader, I've had people share their experiences with me. As we said today, we are not going to talk about the real issues or what students have shared with us, but some experiences that they've said to us. To some, they got their sexual harassment encounter when they approached their lecturers for an assessment. They thought they performed better. To others, it was when a lecturer requested to see them after a class. Regarding sexual advances, these may not come with any threat or blackmail, but in what appears like a genuine interest to date a student. Irrespective of whether the interest is genuine or not, it is ethically wrong. The student is compromised in advance because of the power dynamics. It has been explained earlier by the first speaker. Most students give in to lecture advances due to fear or out of respect. It's because of the power relations and the policy is also clear on that. Sexual harassment is not skewed to students only. I would also plead that if you're a lecturer and a student is harassing you per the definition given, or giving gestures you think are disturbing, please and please and please again, try and report. Yes, it's funny. We might think that we'll handle it on our own way. We might think that we can deal with it. But in so doing, or in handling it, you might end up finding yourself in bed with that student. And that is very problematic. Also, students have perceptions about lecturers. They have these perceptions based on the reputation lecturers have built for themselves over the years. For instance, we have lecturer A, lecturer B. Lecturer A is known to be a very disciplined lecturer. All students know him. Well, you know that if I don't study, I won't pass that course. And no matter what that lecturer does, unless I go through the appropriate courses to pass his paper. So students will go every length, will study very hard to pass that paper. And sometimes you hear them say, even if I get a C or D, I'm okay, because they know they are getting it right and out of their own words, their own sweat. But we have lecturer B, who everybody knows that if I go to his office, talk to him, open my legs to him, I'll get it even if I don't deserve it. So such a student, even if she gets a B, she's not satisfied because she thinks that she could have done better by seducing the lecturer, by harassing the lecturer. And how did that come about? It's based on what our predecessors have told us about that particular course or about that particular lecturer. So with that reputation, I'll go every length, give him what I want to get what I want. I'll plead that our lecturers should be very professional and ethical in their dealings with students. We always complain about nurses and how they treat patients. We complain about how other professions are not being ethical. As we do so, let us also remember that we ourselves need to be professional in our chosen profession. The chairperson, colleague students, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that we need to also give students confidence in the institutions and bodies that work on sexual harassment issues. The single largest constituency of people in this university is a student constituency, on whose behalf I serve as representative on the sexual harassment committee. If the students, who are mostly the victims in this issue, have just one representative on such crucial committee, it erodes their confidence level to some extent, as the other members are largely perceived as co-senior members of which they are alleged perpetrators. And so, as the Vice President of the SRC and the SRC representing the student front, I must not fail to draw attention to this appeal for an addition or a balance. Yes, there is a grassroots representative on it, there is an SRC rep on it, but at least we need a balance of the student representative on the board. I must also call for collective efforts towards awareness creation, sensitization, and rendering services for victims. I am very much aware that last year, the Women's Commissioner, Ms. Faustina Mahama, initiated a peer council project with a counseling center, and delegation was sent to KN University to study how their own is working. I would like to call for synchronization of all efforts geared towards resolving awareness creation, sensitization, and rendering of services to students and victims in this regard. I will end by saying that we are very fortunate as a university that UCC was not investigated on the issue of sex for grade. I believe a second chance is given to us, especially those that we have appetite for such advances. It is an opportunity for us to get things right, so that should there be an investigation here, it will be said, we went, we investigated, and caught none. Thank you very much.
Rather, I'm here to interrogate the myth and realities of sexual harassment, and I seek to do this by using anecdotal evidence of people I interacted with while I raise several reflective questions on them. Before I begin this presentation, I take myths as stories or narratives that are true for some people and untrue for others. So I'm going to explore 8 myths that I gleaned in my interaction with members of the university community. Myth 1. Male lecturers sexually prey on young female students. One of the dominant myths on campus is that male lecturers sexually harass young female students. This myth basically makes sexual harassment not only a male to female encounter, but also presents female students as naive and innocent. Prof. Chair, it is true that many sexual harassment cases within the educational setting have male teachers as culprits and female students as victims. However, it is also true that many male teachers do not engage in this unfortunate act. However, by parodying this myth, people lump all male teachers together, and this may end up affecting some of the healthy relationships that currently exist between male lecturers and female students. Prof. Chair, I read an article on the aftermath of the #MeToo movement, which indicated that prominent and successful male professionals are now reluctant in mentoring young females and having them as their proteges. I see this development eventually taking place on our campuses, as the few male lecturers I was able to interact with indicated their unwillingness to mentor female students and have them as their teaching assistants. I have many examples of male lecturers who have mentored female students, my own Prof. Intre being one. How do we ensure that female students do not lose out of benefiting from the knowledge of experienced male academics, and at the same time ensure that some of these academics do not take undue advantage of female students? Prof. Chair, considering the role of the lecturer is changing as lecturers are encouraged to be friendly with students, especially at the graduate level, and also considering that mentorship sometimes includes closeness, such as having dinners or drinks after school hours. Mentorship, the situation for the male lecturer becomes very uncomfortable. Now, lecturers are encouraged to make themselves accessible to students. Lecturing has moved beyond mere encounter in the lecture room to a dynamic relationship with students, in a way that learning becomes a process that takes place during the relationship. This development and the very nature of proper mentoring places the lecturer and the student in proximity with each other, a context that could be a potential recipe for disaster. Myth 2, which has been spoken by a lawyer: consensual intimate relationship is not sexual harassment. Prof. Chair, closely related to the myth about is the perception that when there is a consensual sexual encounter between a lecturer and a student, the lecturer has not sexually harassed the student. In other words, two consenting adults, be it a lecturer and a student, who have an affair does not constitute sexual harassment. People of this persuasion point to the key defining characteristics of sexual harassment, which is an unwanted sexual advance. The unwanted aspect of it brings to the fore the issue of defiling the sexual autonomy of another. This unwanted sexual advance towards another has been captured under the Criminal and Other Offences Act section 103 as indecent assaults, by which the culprit can be liable for a term of imprisonment not less than 6 months. However, when this myth is carefully subjected to the UCC sexual harassment policy, it raises more questions. In this policy, it is stated that consensual relationship among members of the university community is strictly frowned upon and not countenanced. Indeed, as the policy stands, even sexual relations among married couples who are workers in the university can be deemed unacceptable, especially in the context of unequal power. But not to stretch the argument, the key element the policy brings to the fore is power relations. In the spirit of the policy, there cannot be consensual relation between two people of an unequal power. Hence, a mutual sexual encounter between a lecturer and a student passes off as a case of harassment. Prof. Chair, how can the university regulate such encounters among two consenting adults? Clearly, among the victims, that is students, many do not see the actions of a male lecturer they like and have agreed to be in a relationship with as wrong. Actually, among the students I interacted with, they were surprised to hear that consensual relationship among students and lecturers is unacceptable by the university. They questioned how a lecturer could be faulted for an affair that is consensual. And Prof. Chair, let me add that the students themselves were opposed to a lecturer dating a student of his class, but saw nothing wrong with, say, a lecturer of physics dating a student of music. These are the real perceptions that some members of the university community have. And I believe that it will take extensive education to bring people to the understanding of the spirit of the UCC sexual harassment policy. Whilst we do that, however, could we begin to interrogate further why such consensual relationship amount to sexual harassment? What is the place of sexual misconduct in UCC policy? And I use the term sexual misconduct carefully and mindful of the varied meanings it has. For some people, sexual misconduct is a broad term for which sexual harassment is part, while some see it as synonymous to sexual harassment. There is a third school that sees the term as a non-legal term, thus referring to sexual acts that are not illegal or criminal but unacceptable. This definition captures it in a more appropriate way, that is, a breach of code of conduct. That is, on any other platform, the relationship could have been appropriate and acceptable, but for the context, it is not. It is this third usage that I am concerned with. Prof. Chair, consensual sexual relation between a lecturer and a student, for me, should constitute sexual misconduct and not sexual harassment. The importance of this distinction is not only in the fact that one is criminal and the other is not, but also in the respective sanctions that can be meted out. And I'm going to draw attention to that in the conclusion. Myth 3, male lecturers cannot be sexually harassed. Power play is certainly key to our understanding of sexual harassment, but it's not always the case that the harassment flows from the strong to the weak. Sometimes, and indeed in many cases, it is the reverse. I have interacted with many male lecturers who have given vivid and disturbing stories of their encounters with female students. From these lecturers, I gathered that the modus operandi of these students ranges from subtle gestures such as suggestive text or WhatsApp messages to overt and daring actions such as removal of breasts and stripping naked in a lecturer's office. Some ladies have no panties on and sit in front of a lecturer with their legs parted. The truth is that male lecturers do get harassed. However, many male lecturers cannot report these encounters for fear of being labeled as weak or fools. We are all aware of the socialization of boys and how many men define their manhood from their sexual competencies. But Prof. Chair, if indeed sexual harassment is any action of a sexual nature and deemed to be unwanted by the victim, then the question is that, are these gestures by female students to the male lecturers unwanted? Has sexual harassment taken place when these gestures are given equal reciprocal response? Once again, we get into the quagmire of whether consensual affair constitutes sexual harassment. Certainly, in the power equation between female students and male lecturers, the latter have the upper hand. Still, there is no underestimating the power of the female allure. Some male lecturers are overpowered by the powerful allure of their female students. When gender activists claim that because of the power dynamics, it is the male lecturer who has to be faulted at all times, they are indeed right to some extent. But we should equally acknowledge that female students who aggressively pursue male lecturers is an important, intricate factor that cannot be simply avoided. Myth 4, student ladies who wear provocative clothes are asking for sex. Prof. Chair, many guys, including lecturers, have the notion that when ladies are provocative with their attire, it is a subtle way of inviting a man for sex. For some male lecturers, students who encounter them in such provocative dresses are asking for it. This belief clearly shows that many men still operate under the patriarchal notions of their entitlement to sex from women. One of the erroneous beliefs many men have grown up with is that men cannot control themselves when they see a lady almost naked or dressed provocatively. I ask my students whether they have been to the beach before and whether they see all the ladies in their swim costumes. And I ask them to describe their appearance. And I continue to ask them whether there were men around and whether these men were in a sexual frenzy with the women on the beach. My point is that we see almost naked ladies at the beach, but we do not pounce on them and have sex with them. If we cannot control ourselves, then we should not be if we cannot control ourselves, then we should be pouncing on any half-naked or naked woman we come across. Certainly, this cannot be the case. Provocative dressing by female students should be discouraged, but that certainly cannot be an excuse for sexually engaging female students. Closely related to this idea is that when a male has an erection, then sex should necessarily follow. Prof. Chair, many men here will agree with me that The factors that lead to a man getting an erection are numerous. One can get erection in a taxi or trotro when the car is very bumpy. Erection often occurs at dawn. Some even get erection by hearing sounds that are deemed sexually sensuous. In fact, erection is an everyday occurrence for men. Getting erection by seeing a student dress provocatively is no news. If only men will come to understand that erection does not equal to sex. Otherwise, our halls of residence will be full of uncontrollable sex at every dawn, and we can imagine Casford. Week 5, weak female students engage in sex for grades. When there is a sexual encounter between a male lecturer and a student, many perceive the female student to be weak. To be a weak student who sees the relationship as the means of making good grades. My interaction with students and lecturers give credence to this perception. Male lecturers recount the countless approaches of female students who seek to offer their bodies in exchange for grades. Many a times, the student misses an assessment or performs very low in the assessment and the exams and sees the only way out for her is to offer her body in exchange for grades. Prof. Chair, we need to be clear, however, that sexual harassment goes beyond academic abilities. Many good female students are either targeted by male lecturers or are themselves predators preying on male lecturers. The reason for a lecturer targeting a student or the vice versa are multiple. On the latter, a good student or an average student could have financial problems that can lead her to the doorstep of a male lecturer or who may seek to take advantage of her. There could also be emotional problems on the part of the students. Prof. Chair, good female students may just admire a lecturer, not for any obscure reason, and this harmless admiration can lead her into a harmful encounter. On the former, a lecturer might observe how exceptional a female student is in class. It might be the uniqueness of her dressing or any other personal traits of the students. My point is that it is not only weak students who are victims of or prey of sexual harassment. The factors that account for the selection of a victim from both students and lecturers are manifold and quite complex. Female lecturers do not get harassed. That is myth 6. Because of the importance of power play in sexual harassment cases, many are of the belief that female lecturers who have power by virtue of their position cannot be harassed by their male students who are subordinate to them. However, there exists anecdotal evidence and scientific evidence to the contrary. Women in positions of authority, such as female lecturers, can be subjected to harassment by male students or other males who occupy formerly less powerful positions. This is known in the literature as contra-power harassment. During my interaction with some female lecturers, I gathered the modus operandi of such daring male students include writing suggestive comments and their numbers on examination papers, passing off comments such as, "Madam, today you look exceptionally beautiful," or "Madam, I really like your butt." Contra-power harassment may cause female lecturers feelings of shame as they feel that they are being sexualized by those whom they are meant to have authority. Studies indicate that some female lecturers who experience this form of harassment develop psychological problems, including lack of self-esteem, irritability, isolation, depression, anger, guilt, and helplessness. Myth 7. African men are culturally positioned to relate with women in a sexually suggestive way. I have heard many Ghanaian men ranting that this whole idea of sexual harassment is not African and that it is a Western imposition on the African culture. What is being termed as sexual harassment, they claim, is a reflection of how African men have always related with their women. In other words, what is being termed as sexual harassment is rather a cultural practice within the African society where males are superior and dominant, have the right to pass comments or carry out minor sexual advances towards their female counterparts. For instance, how can just a comment such as, "Akos, today you look good. Can we go out and have fun?" How can this be construed as sexual harassment for the African man? For such people, proper sexual harassment include incidents such as rape and other major sexual crimes. But Prof. Chair, I believe that the issue of sexual harassment has been stretched to some extreme levels in some Western societies. In some Western societies, sexual harassment has created divide among men and women in the workplace, with men very uncomfortable working with females. Also, it is true that perceptions and understandings of sexual harassment has cultural undertones, in that culturally derived values and beliefs serve as norms that determine when certain behaviors and actions can be seen as appropriate or otherwise. However, as Africans, we do ourselves a great disservice when we reason out that the concept of sexual harassment is a Western imposition on Africans. Sexual harassment fights for upholding of universal values that cannot be denied any given culture. For instance, sexual harassment policies seek to provide an equal level field for both males and females and a safe environment free of discrimination. In any case, granted, African culture promotes the objectification and sexism of women. Do we as a people accept this, or we can challenge ourselves through an intracultural criticism of who we are as a people? Last myth, nepotism among lecturers, and the idea that no remedy will come from reporting. There is lack of confidence among victims, that is students, of sexual harassment based on the notion that lecturers know each other and that they protect each other. The students who report these incidents expect the case to be heard and the perpetrator punished. However, for any punishment to be meted out, the issue is one of viable evidence. In most cases, there is lack of real evidence, and yet the students expect actions to be taken based on the speculations, and if that is not done, then the myth of nepotism is enforced in their views. The truth of the matter is that although lecturers are not willing and ready to push their fellow lecturers into the bin, the rule of the game is evidence, and without it, nothing can be done. Conclusion. Our attempt to dismiss the stories and myths on sexual harassment on UCC campus will amount to turning a blind eye to the perception and experience of members of the university community. These myths, whether real or invented, play the important role of giving people answers in their attempt to rationalize this whole beast of sexual harassment. This is why the university should be interested in what people are thinking in order to provide better and well-informed answers. Prof. Chair, in this respect, what do we make out of these myths and realities of sexual harassment? Clearly, I see a hydra-headed problem here. Sexual harassment on the campuses of Ghanaian universities is only a reflection of the larger problem of the failures in the Ghanaian society. Our moral senses have relaxed. Many students face economic hardship. Many parents are renegading on their duties. We have been socialized erroneously, and we have normalized what is wrong. As a matter of fact, our value systems are deteriorating, and people want to succeed at all costs. Clearly, with this scenario, the context is ripe for all forms of abuses, including sexual abuses. One challenge, Prof. Chair, I would like to throw out there is for us to reflect on the difference between sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, and how the difference can be made to reflect in our policy. The issue of sexual misconduct, as used in this paper, is not mostly reported, therefore reluctantly ignored. However, where sexual harassment are validly established, proper punishment in the policy are meted out without fear or favor. The policy, therefore, I believe, has to properly define the concepts and the punishment for both sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, taking into consideration their differences. This is because lumping it all together, as it may appear in the policy, in the sense of forbidding all consensual relationship, does not make those who engage in sexual harassment see the magnitude of their actions. They may say that, after all, we are all on the same pedestal. However, carefully considered, the harassment is more hideous, since it borders on illegality, while misconduct is unacceptable and a matter of etiquette. So this is something for the university to reflect on. And I have some few suggestions here on how probably we can tackle it. And as we've said, education is very important because many people do not understand the issues and are ignorant of what exactly constitutes sexual harassment. Again, we need to make sure that in handling sexual harassment, we don't make people feel that every action of theirs is under scrutiny, especially the male lecturers. Rather, members of the university committee should all be encouraged to be professional in their engagement, with their professional engagement in the university. And I think with that, probably we can make some headways. Thank you for listening.
I would like to stand on the protocol already observed. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My topic is to deal with the way forward, dealing with sexual harassment on UCC campus, the way forward. Sexual harassment on campuses, especially our campus, are varied. We've talked about power relations,
And the speaker who just finished speaking talked about notions of masculinity embedded in the many myths that he talked about. There is also victim blaming, victims who deserve what they got. So you hear people talking about the fact, asking victims questions such as, what were you doing on his bed? Why did you go to his room? Why were you wearing that dress? All these fuel sexual harassment on the university campuses. And then there's this issue of value systems. People are not aware of what they value as individuals. And so people have a poor conception of their value systems, and so they engage in any practices at all. There's poor communication. People are not able to tell each other what they really think. And so somebody is harassing you sexually. Every time you walk by, this person is hitting you on the back, and you are not comfortable with that, and you can't tell this person, I'm not comfortable with what you're doing because of the power relations or what you're afraid will be the outcome. We also have to deal with consent issues, as we talked about, issues of consent. Am I really giving consent? Or do you even have consent? And you know what consent is? It's affirmative, enthusiastic, and clear. So you need to find out from your partner if this partner is really in agreement with what it is that you want to do. And mostly when we talk about consent issues between lecturers and students, it shouldn't come up at all because there's no need for a consensual relationship. Between students, we want consent because they are on the same level, and so a male student should be able to solicit from his partner whether he should move on to do an act, to engage in any sexual act. So, for example, Akosia, I want to kiss you on the lips. Akosia should be able to say enthusiastically, yes. If the yes is not enthusiastic and it is not really clear, consent has not been given. So a yes that comes like, yes, it's not really a yes. So consent issues deal with that. Then we talk about possible harassers. We've talked about lecturers and TAs. We know about our TAs, fellow students, administrators, hall tutors, hall assistants, UCC workers, in fact, almost everybody. So it's not something that is for some people. People are thinking, especially with the documentary that just came out, it's only lecturers who are involved. No, everybody is involved. And we've talked about the university policy and then the committee that addresses sexual harassment. And we've noticed that there are a few things that we need to take cognizance of, especially in line of the fact that the policy is due for review next year. So we have to look at what we mean by guests. And then when lawyer was talking, it appeared as if you were actually protecting our trespassers. But they're actually also worrisome because in as much as we don't need to harass them, we don't also want them to harass us, right? And then we need to look at the power relations and then also the position of the vice chancellor. Sometimes it appears as if when we talk about sexual harassment, the focus is mostly on women and we neglect men. But it is not that we intentionally do that. It is because sexual harassment is a gendered issue in source and in recipients. You have more male perpetrators and more female recipients, even though we have male to male perpetrators as well. Right. And then the reasons for sexual harassment are mostly gender related. Constructions of gender. What do I mean by I'm a man? Then victim blaming. And so more often than not, you'd notice that the discussion is focusing on women. But that does not rule out the fact that we have males who are also harassed. The important thing for us as an institution is the effects of sexual harassment. One, we can talk about the effects of sexual harassment on the individual. And the counseling center would attest to the fact that they have to deal with a lot of emotional health problems. Professor Linda Ford is here, and I know she would contribute to this discussion. She's been working with victims or survivors of sexual harassment for a long time, long before SEGRAD came into being. And so I know she's had more experience with this sort of thing. The loss of self-esteem, the loss of security. You have people walking about, they don't feel secure, they don't feel safe. the distraction of the prospects for academic and career advancement. Some students drop out of school. Some people would no longer want to engage in the career that they decided on. Then the stress on family members, intimidation and victimization of close associates as well. Then we have to also deal with the effects on the institutions. Questioning of female intellectual abilities. So people wonder, are the females from this institution really as intelligent as their certificates attest? And then there's no effort, actually, to question male power at the base of sexual harassment. There's always that fueling male sexual harassment. So there is loss of confidence in institutional power structures. So you talk to students and they have no confidence in the structures that the university has in place for addressing some of these things. Loss of credibility in degrees awarded. Institutional merit-based culture is also undermined. And so there's something that is referred to as STGs, sexually transmitted grades. What are the implications of these for campus relations? So as Dr. Ochi was saying, people become very, very careful. So because of these assumptions, there's a lot of pressure or burden put on females, as if they are the ones to halt sexual harassment in its track. There's no healthy female to male relation on campus. The men are always trying to guess if the woman is soliciting or not. So my student is being nice to me, then I wonder, what is this girl up to? You know, I look at you and I want to keep you at a distance. Females cannot ask males for help. You don't know what the person would ask in return. And it goes on to reinforce male power over women. What is the way forward for us? Education, sensitization is very, very important. As we all know, there are many of us on this campus who are not aware of the university's sexual harassment policy. So we need strong support from UTAG and all other unions on campus on awareness creation. And this gathering is actually a case in point. Kudos for that. SEGRAD has been involved in a lot of education and sensitization programs, tailor-made for students, staff, and other groups on campus. And this semester alone, we've met with national service personnel, we've met with hall users and wardens, and then we've also undertaken the relationship techniques training for all fresh students. When they come to campus during the orientation week, it's in its third year now, where we create the awareness, bring students or make people aware of what sexual harassment is and how to deal with that. There's also been a number of media engagements. We've had some media engagements with ATL-FM, Radio Central, John News, and then our Facebook advocacy is ongoing. And we believe that all these are important for us as the way forward. Some measures we'd like to consider as a group, as an institution, that there should be mandatory online sexual harassment training for all academics and students. So before you even assess your courses or your courses for the year, or even before you register, you open the university webpage and then there's this short training on sexual harassment for you before you can go on to do whatever it is that you want to do. It's been done in other places, and I think once we do it here, every person on the campus would have an idea of what we're talking about. And then also an intimation of the policy to be stated in admission and appointment letters of all newly admitted students, staff, and other appointees. If we have a line or a paragraph in our appointment letters or our admission letters telling us that the university's sexual harassment policy and stand, this would go a long way to educate us. We're also thinking about, and I was glad when Lawyer Swansea Asian mentioned this, naming and shaming, to have a database of offenders with their pictures and their names publicized, so that one, everybody will get to know that you cannot go scot-free when you engage in this practice. And then also, so that when we see you walking around, we are very careful because we know what you are capable of. Perhaps these measures would help to curb this canker. There are some measures that are currently under consideration is to get online reporting. Some students would prefer the anonymity. It's not even students, staff actually, would prefer the anonymity of reporting. They don't want to talk to anybody, they just want this and so the online reporting is good. And at the moment, we've signed a document to get the toll-free number. And then also, we talked about this, the removal of the sexual harassment component from the university statutes. Because the sexual harassment document is a live document that requires constant changes. So if we decouple it from the statute, it would limit the conflict therein. And then to introduce a tail or whistleblower bystander intervention in addressing sexual harassment policies. Some names keep coming up whenever this topic comes up. And everybody would say, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. You know, you would wonder, why is it that of all the lecturers on the University of Ghana campus, these two lecturers were targeted? Names keep coming up. So perhaps if we could activate some investigations into some of these things based on the frequency of names that come up without a formal report from survivors, this could also help us. SEGRAD is also coming up with posters and banners on sexual harassment as forms of education to be placed on all notice boards. We would very soon launch this program. We would have some of these posters and banners coming up so that students and people around would get to know what to do in terms of sexual harassment. We cannot afford to keep our heads under the sand. And then, so I have some of the board. Students have the right to report whoever harasses them. It could be you. What if it were your child, your niece, your lover? Sexual harassment can affect your career and education. No means no. Men get sexually harassed too. Don't be ashamed to report. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the fact that even though lawyer Swazian has said that the University of Cape Coast is not really an equal opportunity institution, we are trying, actually, we're trying, and we're priding ourselves that we are an equal opportunity institution. We'll get there very soon. Sexual harassment mars and inhibits this. It doesn't help us in achieving our aims. And then also, there's this erroneous conception about SEGRAD and its focus. And once we address this, it will make the center very effective. SEGRAD is not a center for male bashing. It is a center that is interested in the advancement of the genders. So we deal with everything related to the genders, and we know we have more than one gender. Gender does not equal women. So I would like all of us to debuse our mind of the fact that SEGRAD is male bashing and work together with SEGRAD so that the awareness creation can go on, and very soon sexual harassment will not be an issue on UCC campus. Thank you all very much, and I await any anxieties or inputs that you have.
Thank you. Yes, please, if dignitaries can come up and as they come in, the music department will give us an interlude as we anticipate your questions. Thank you.
Could receive a gift from your student if you are sure that it would not cloud your judgment. There is a thin line. So what if it is a birthday? You are so close to the students, and then they find that on your birthday they can give some, but the state has a policy about receipt of gifts. For me, I think it could cloud your judgment. So long as there is that power dynamics at play, no receipt of gifts until the relationship is over. So that is my response to it. Again, there was a question about expediting the resolution of disputes that come before the committee. 21 working days, that is 4 weeks, plus another day of the next week. That, I think, is long enough to have an issue resolved. Yes, I concede it's possible in some instances, depending on the nature of the complaint, and more importantly, the attitude of the parties involved. If they are cooperative, and again, the timing as well. Now that we're about to enter into an examination period, I have a paper, I have an assignment, I have a quiz. So these dynamics feed into the timing, but we do concede that if it is delayed, then it's possible that especially the victim or the alleged victim may not cooperate, may be tired of going and then coming to face the committee and then all that. Again, somebody asked the question as to the nature of evidence. It depends on the complaint. But thankfully, the policy specifies an informal procedure as well as a formal one. If it is not too serious, I use serious advisedly, if there is no physical or bodily contact, then there is the option of an informal procedure being recommended, where you could make a complaint even to a colleague, to a student, but you are advised to be very careful because you do not know who that information may reach. So, chapter 3 talks about, chapter 3 of the sexual harassment policy, UCC, talks about the informal approach where it doesn't have to come before the committee. So based on what happens, I mean, it could either be a friend, another support person, a professional counselor in the counseling services, a hall tutor, a registrar, dean of students, your immediate supervisor, HOD, dean, union rep. So all these lines of complaints are initially recommended if there was no physical contact. So where that statement was made about somebody having big butts and then all that, there could be that informal approach where you take the person on that, I don't want this, it is not allowed. If you repeat this, I will take it up. So you could confront that person initially, or there is another line of action you could take by reporting to another person without necessarily coming before the committee. Orientation for lecturers or senior members. Yes, it is true. The Sexual Harassment Committee on its own has not embarked on this. I considered this in my earlier presentation where I stated that SEGRAD has actually taken that up. But for senior members, we made the recommendation. I think in one of the cases that came before us, senior members did not appear to have knowledge of the existence of the policy. So we suggested that it be made visible on the university's website, as well as liaising with the HR so that before senior members come in, this policy is made available to them. When a female harasses a male, it is the same procedure, except that the challenge appears to be with our cultural dynamics. But harassment is harassment, whether it is male to female or female to male. So this is what I can say for now based on what I indicated. If there are outstanding ones, I believe the other panelists will do as the honest. Thank you.
And that's what I was trying to categorize under sexual misconduct, where none of the parties feel aggrieved or has been violated in any way. So I think that that should be categorized as sexual misconduct. And in fact, what Prof said is very true, sexual bribery and corruption. I think it also fits under sexual misconduct. That's an important dimension she brought into the discussion. And because there is not really about the students is not really going there to harass, or the lecturer also wants the thing. So it's an exchange. I give you grades, you offer me your body and all that. But how do we, is this sexual harassment? I think they fit under sexual misconduct. That is why we need to begin to reflect on this whole issue of sexual misconduct, what it really constitutes, and then the punishment that, or the sanctions that we can put there. What happens to a female student who harasses a male lecturer? We've not had a case of that. No male lecturer has reported. So, but I think what will happen to that female student will be the same as what happens to a male student or a male lecturer when indeed they are found to be guilty. And evidence, my chair has spoken. As for the evidence, I keep telling students today it's about evidence. So yes, the WhatsApp, text messages, and today students sometimes record. They record lecturers and all that. But in some of the cases we have, they come up with some of these type of evidence. If you have that, then interrogate them. Otherwise, without evidence, what the chair normally does is that the two people are given opportunity to cross-examine themselves, and we are looking for inconsistencies. Who will stick to his message, and that's how we're able to deduce whether indeed the act happened or not. Thank you.
You do follow up on your victims, because there are cases where victims, after they lodge complaints with you, are threatened by lecturers. Some of them are stigmatized in the classrooms, and their friends even withdraw from them because they don't want to be associated with someone who is embarrassing or disgracing lecturers. So if you do follow up on them, then my second issue is on the composition of the committee members. I know it's made up of reps from the various unions and the student associations. But many a times, those who are selected to represent the unions are not so sensitive to some of these issues. So, as the chair, I think we need to look at this again, because there are reports from students that when they go or attend to your sessions, the kind of questioning even scares them. And at times they regret lodging such complaints. And that could even account for the reasons why they withdraw the cases along the line. So I think we need to look at it.
Center. I'd first like to appreciate all the speakers, but Prof. Nyaku Samson, thank you very much for the very professional way you started your presentation. I was really impressed. One point for the ladies and then 1 point for the men. When it comes to recovery from sexual harassment or rape, the literature will tell you there's nothing like total recovery from a rape experience. You can only recover towards some amount of normalcy. And it really hurts me that when I came across some literature that gave me a specific, finding on how long it takes to recover from a rape incident, I didn't note it. I've lost it, but I can never remember, forget the number of years. When a lady, I said I'll speak for the men later. When a lady has gone through the experience of rape, some research has been conducted which shows that it takes about 38 years without any intervention. That is, if a person doesn't go for counseling or see a psychologist or anything, it takes about 38 years to, regain, all that you lost. So if you've had this experience at, let's say, age 25, at 38 years, and how much of your life is left? So my first point is actually a contribution to encourage our young ladies. Please don't keep it to yourself when you've had a bad experience. And this will be my second appeal. Please trust us enough at the counseling center. When you come with issues of abuse, whether it's student or student lecturer, we don't, abandon you halfway. We stick with you and make sure you're not victimized. So please, this is a word to our young ladies. But I have a concern as well for our men. And I think that I was glad when Dr. Mununkum said that SEGRAD is not about male bashing. But I honestly think that we are in danger of forgetting our young boys. The focus on girls has been good, and I think it is good. It needs to continue. But I think, who cares about young boys in school? How does a senior high school boy process an experience of wet dreams? How do they manage their sexuality? Who focuses on these concerns for our young boys? And we'll put it on our culture. So they grow up, and they must learn to act tough and be tough. It's not just a Ghanaian thing. I think it's more than Ghanaian. But our culture really, promotes male chauvinism. So my question would be, all these things build up to make it difficult for
my desire. And then it's fusing gradually to the females in that if I sleep with her through the normal way, everybody would probably see it. So they are now having anal sex with the girls too. We are not supposed to, code of conduct, say the experiences people bring to us. I am not a counselor, I'm an academic advisor and an examiner, but maybe per my response to students, a lot of them visit my office. And girls are now accepting anal instead of the vaginal sex because they don't want mommy or auntie to know that I have done what I'm not supposed to do per our culture and religion. We can't rule them out. And then I still want to be accepted by the group. I'm in a group study. I came fresh, or I am the in girl in campus. So they are using other ways too. And please, anal sex is not healthy for anybody, even to boys. It's not, from my point of view. So when they come to us as counselors, please, let's test other waters. It's not the vaginal alone that is trending now. It is in UCC and it's here with us. Thank you.
Of religion and human values. I want to know if, in fact, my question is addressed to Lawyer Swansea. I want to know if there is anything for a female student harassed around our campuses, like Akototre, Amamoma, by a non-student around.
Of Finance. I think my own will be a suggestion to the provost and all the members here. We have had the system where we said that every student that comes to the university is an adult. And for that matter, we treat them as adults. But my experience over time tells me that most of the students that we have now are not adults. And so as a university, I think we need to change the way we look at our students so that some of these things that we face will not happen. Because the more we treat them as adults, the more they treat themselves as children. And so we need to have a second look at that particular perspective. Thank you.
And it has come to stay with us. So some of the things I spoke of, such as men can't control themselves. Men are like gas cooker. They are partial. It's like when they see no, they're on fire. Men are supposed not to exhibit emotions. You don't cry. Keep things to yourself. Deal with it inwardly. All these things fuel how we perceive women. So I think the problem is at the heart of our society in terms of how we socialize our young boys. And also the fact that sex has become a taboo, even in the 21st century still. This whole issue about sexual education has even become a problem. And as you rightly said, how do boys make sense of certain their sexualization? And do they understand their sexual orientation? And the fact that as a nation, sometimes connected to this issue of anal sex, we are not even prepared to speak about this whole issue about homosexuality. Really discuss it dispassionately, look at the issues in there and all that. So I think it's a complex host of issues that as a nation we need to, and probably as an academic institution, we have to start discussing these issues and providing the direction which we should go as a nation. On the issue of anal sex, I just want to say that I agree because some girls have the impression that they want to safeguard their virginity. So, and they have a very naive notion of the virginity. Until you see blood coming from the vagina, it means it's not been broken. So if you can have anything inserted that is not enough to bring the blood. So we've had cases of people allowing for fingering, for instance. So you finger, but I don't do it in such a way that to break the hymen for blood to come, so that I still have my virginity safeguarded. So all these notions are there. I'm not surprised that in the quest to safeguard the virginity, they'll prefer that they use the anus for sex. And sex, we know, is not, most of the times our notion is that it's only vaginal intercourse, but we have anal intercourse, oral sex. There are so many forms of it. And if we are being traditional, the young ones are being very modern by exploring the various sexual opportunities that are there, and will help them safeguard certain um, notions or impressions they have. So I think sex education is very, very important, and we need to keep talking about how our boys are brought up. So second, it's true you are not male bashing, but focus on the young guys a bit. Focus on them, because I teach sexual and domestic violence. It will amaze you the notions about our men. They seem not to agree at all. For instance, that yeah, they say you have something called blue balls. Has any ball turned blue before? At least I know as black men, you can't even see it. Maybe the white, since they have a fair skin, it has turned blue before. I've never seen any blue balls. It is there, and all this. So all these notions are there. And you've had ladies, university ladies, who really believe in this blue ball myth and say that, well, so I'll not let him have it. So I'll let him have his way with me in order not for him to get the blue ball. What blue balls? So anyway.
Yes, the question on the follow-up. During my tenure, we have done to a point.
In fact, when I read about my colleagues' proposed projects, I couldn't wait to come and be part of it. As president emerging from a BBC video issue, I guess it would be good to get some more insight. The media engagement was intense. The university in itself has had a sexual harassment policy since 2010. From 2011, there has been a committee that has been working. The committee, in its works, have found close to 4 or 5 of our colleagues culpable, and then they've been dismissed. I don't think the public heard as much of it as we heard of the BBC incident. And it could be one of the ways to go. The university from then had been contemplating what to do in circumstances as such. Do we publish the names of persons that have been sacked for whatever reason? The persons also have rights to certain other appeals and possibility of going to the courts. And so, since the committee has been working and have found people guilty, and the university went to the extent of dismissing some, I don't think we have publicized this the way BBC did to us. The good about BBC's thing is that the sensitization we are seeking to send out to colleagues and to students, it achieved very much that. That many of our colleagues who were oblivious to the fact that this committee exists, the laws exist, and the laws can bite, certainly it drew their attentions to that. Our students also got the wing of the fact that they have a right to make reports to various courtesies, not only the sexual harassment committee. They have heads of department and floor tutors and all of that, which they could report to. And so, to that end, yes. On my campus, the flip side is that students and lecturers are no longer relating as would be the case before the BBC thing. And so genuinely students have concerns. They are skeptical about coming to interact with their lecturers because they might not be able to, you cannot tell what the lecturer's reaction will be and whether you're not wearing one of the eyes. And so it's quite a challenging matter, and I think that I want to commend UTAG UCC for taking this step. It's one way by which we can spread the gospel, and it is one way by which we can ensure that our colleagues are safe, our students are safe, our parents don't go through the hustle of having to deal with somebody who is traumatized as a result of actions of this kind. And so I'm very happy to be part of this, and I commend you very highly for taking this step. And I'm looking forward to other campuses following suit and doing same, so that we can together uh, ensure that we are comfortable in the environment in which we work. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. We will take the closing remarks from our chair.
So that we'll get to understand ourselves better. We'll know what is happening and how we can remove ourselves from the media discourse. Those who spoke to us opened many chapters of the book that we thought we had read, that apparently we haven't read or we haven't read properly. We all know, as was it Kojo who said it, that, or it was Professor Nyako Samson, that we have heard and heard from somebody who also heard, from somebody who also heard, and nobody is ready to say that it's a reality or a myth. Today we've been told that it's actually a reality, but there are also myths. There are myths that we need to discount. And I think UTAG has done very well for putting this together. I have listened and taken some points that I think I should carry to management. The sexual harassment policy, the special gazette, I can see the constitution or the composition of the committee is even different from what we have in the statutes. So what the committee, that's the standing committee now, how it is constituted is a little different from what we have in the gazette. So management needs to actually define or redefine what the composition is. One of our colleagues said that we should look at the composition because people complain, especially students complain, that when they go there, the people who are there have biased thoughts. So, it didn't happen. Or, why did you put yourself in that situation? A deserving victim. But I also want to speak, for our colleagues that sometimes the impression is that once a student has reported about you, it means you are guilty. And so you have to go and prove yourself not guilty, which I think is unfortunate. Maybe that is not what is communicated, but that is the perception. It's like earlier perceptions of Dofsu, that once you were a man and you were taken there, you were guilty of the offense. So now you have to prove yourself not guilty. So these are all gray areas that we need to work at because we all want to have a very safe and secure environment to engage in our business, our entrepreneurship. And just as the students should be safe, the lecturer, the staff should also be safe. And I was just talking to Professor Wampon, and we said that perhaps what has happened is not just something that is happening in the universities, but actually the whole society is kind of getting very sick. The whole society is kind of getting very sick, and the university is a unit of the whole society. But the good thing about us is that we are the repository of knowledge, and so we should know better. So we are the ones who should go out there and educate people. But if we ourselves are not educated, then it becomes a problem for the bigger society. So sometimes we need to get into problems to realize what we have to do. It's unfortunate that BBC tackled Legon, but you know what? When I read the news on Ghana Ghana Web. I also read the comments that people made. And I also read people saying if they go to UCC, they should look for this man in this department. They mentioned names. Yes. Usually when I read news online, Ghana Web, I go to the comments just for the comic relief. But this one, it wasn't a comic relief. Yeah. If it hasn't been taken out, you can go there and read, and thank God if your name hasn't been mentioned there. So it is a real issue. There are myths that we can discount, but the issue is real and it is not peculiar to University of Ghana. It cannot be peculiar to University of Cape Coast or to any other university, both in our country and abroad. It is a problem with human institution. Opportunity employer. And so nobody should be discriminated against because the person refused to offer sexual favors. For students who are here and the student leadership, I will urge you and I will beg you in the name of God that if anything of this sort happens, please let us carry the process to the end so that we'll see whether our processes work. Because if you report and midway you decide that I'm no longer interested, then you make it difficult for us to test the process. And you make it very difficult for us to sanitize the system. I accept that we should have a whistleblower policy maybe in a sexual harassment document. Because when we have a whistleblower policy, then people will feel very, very comfortable to maybe carry on to the end of the process. Because until we carry on to the end of the process, we cannot heal our system. And we need to heal it because we all agree that we have issues with sexuality here. So we need to heal the system. And nobody can come from anywhere to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. And I'm very, very sure that all of us here are very proud of our university. And when it's mentioned in the media for any negative thoughts, we are not happy. We are quick to stand up and defend the university. But we must also work towards healing our university so that we can live at peace and do what we have come here to do. As I said, I thank UTAG for this dialogue. I hope that it will not be the end of the dialogue. DHR is here. We will talk about how to make this available so that the sexual harassment policy is available. And if we need to remind people in letters that you are appointed to be a lecturer, you have a 6 years contract after it, you should renew it. We also want to remind you that the University of Cape Coast has a sexual harassment policy. Maybe we will need to think about it that way because it looks like we tend to forget things very, very quickly. So I thank you, Tag, for asking me to come to this. I have educated myself very well, and I pray that those of us here will be ambassadors to go out and tell the others that we all need to heal the system so that we can live in peace, and those of us in authority to educate the next generation of Ghanaians. Thank you very much, audience, for being such a good audience.
Generally, I think after the expose, generally a lot of our colleagues became more conscious of the fact that indeed, if they engage themselves in activities of that kind, they needed to take a second look at themselves and act more professionally. What has happened in the past is that the university has had a regulation governing sexual harassment and issues of misconduct. And so UTAG, at the UTAG front, we try to give orientation to newly appointed colleagues and we make them aware of this. And so Of course, it's a large community, and so you find people going out of the way to misconduct themselves in various forms. And so it was an eye opener. It was something that really broadened the scope of sensitization amongst not only lecturers but also students. And so lecturers, of course, beyond the video, will become more cautious, will act more professionally, and that is the positive element we can draw from the video. Similarly, students have been conscientized about the fact that they have a right in which they must take into their own hands by reporting people who harass them. And it's not always, like I said today, it's not the case that the issues of sexual harassment is limited to lecturers, male lecturers, and then female students. It's within the entire university community. It cuts across all categories of workers and among students themselves. And so we all need to be responsible for our actions in relation to getting ourselves familiar with the policy, getting ourselves familiar with the laws that govern how we ought to function within the university system. And I guess the expose did quite in exposing and giving us that conscious. Well, generally, like I said, the system is that these our colleagues who got caught on the tape genuinely thought they were dealing with people who truly were in need. And ultimately, we all know what the outcome is. And so people are more careful how you relate to people and who comes to you, and whether or not the person is not planted to pick some information. Certainly, I mean, it's a human institution and people are bound when indeed they are genuinely in need. And so besides, there's also this feeling amongst particularly female students who are genuinely working hard and making their good grades that you leave the university with, say, a first class, a female, and there's no, you go looking for a job, and there's no guarantee that they will not tag your degree as possibly one that was earned as a result of having an affair with a man and getting good grades. And so all of these perspectives are things that we are having conversations about in terms of maintaining the integrity of our degrees, in terms of maintaining the integrity of the university, as well as ensuring that our colleagues are more professional in the discharge of their duties. And so I guess we would go over the storms. Like I said, it's not the first time. The university system itself has found people guilty and has dismissed people for engaging themselves in various forms of misconduct, including sexual harassment. Dr. Samuel Nkumba, and the UTAG president for University of Ghana.
Thank you very much. As a responsible body, UTAG, having listened to the media discourse on sexual harassment, we felt that it was important because we noticed that a lot of our colleagues, even though the policy exists, they have not even taken time to read. And for those who have read, as to whether they even understood the content. So we decided to put together a team made up of people from the Sexual Harassment Committee, the lawyers there, as well as the Center for Gender and Advocacy, so that we could bring the issue on sexual harassment and its policy to the barest minimum so that everybody can understand. Once we understand, then we can abide by it. And you notice that we also did not just talk to lecturers, we brought in all the administrators and then students as well, so that we could understand from each perspective, and even also from the counseling center, what are the issues that they have been receiving. So that is why UTAG decided to put this together. And so far as we are concerned, I think we think it's been very fruitful and very educative. So that is what we can say for now. Yeah.
So from here, what?
Yeah, from here we're going to, a lot of recommendations came up, even with regards to the policy itself. Some revisions needs to be made. So we, as a union, we're going to put up a memo to management so that it could be considered. There is a need for some review to be made. There are further deliberations, actions that needs to be taken, especially as to how we get our members to be educated. There are suggestions as to we putting it on an online platform and all that. We think that these are positive comments that are coming up, and we're going to put a memo together to management so that we can take it from there. It is our wish that our members will know the details of the policy, so that if you know and then you are at fault, then I mean, the consequences may come. But if you don't know, sometimes people do not know exactly what their actions are, and then until they get to know that they've been caught up by the law, and that becomes had I known. So we want to avoid the issues of had I known. Yeah. Thank you very much.